Morning, everyone, and welcome to this How Will AI Impact Cybersecurity Roundtable? Myself, Steve Stobo. Today, I'm representing IMSM as one of their ISO specialists, but my background is based around business continuity, cybersecurity, and also AI-driven autonomous security solutions, as well as hopefully bringing some insight and thoughts around how ISO standards such as ISO 27001 fit in for AI cybersecurity. So joining us today is James Dell, who is the Head of Technical Architecture and Associate Director at Planet IT. James is one of the leading voices in IT in the UK, and after a decade of working in IT management, he joined Planet IT and now leads their technical architecture team. So James is very much a solution-orientated technical professional with a proven track record in the design and implementation of really robust infrastructure solutions, but has a core focus on cybersecurity and all things AI. And joining us alongside James is Rhys Edwards. Rhys plays a real pivotal role in IMSM's marketing team and brings with him a real deep passion for artificial intelligence. His extensive experience encompasses working with large language models from both the front and the back end perspective. Through his work, Rhys has uncovered innovative ways to harness the power of this new emerging technology to enhance IMSM's marketing strategy. With his unique insights, Rhys is here to kickstart our discussion by posing the first question. So, Rhys, over to you, mate.
Thank you very much, Steve. So the first point of discussion that we want to touch on today is how have we seen AI change the current threat landscape?
Cool. I'm going to jump straight in then, Rhys. So I suppose the most obvious thing is it starts with bigger, better, bolder, more sophisticated malware, because ultimately, when you're not writing it yourself and you're using AI to help you generate that code, you're learning from the experiences that are out there. So we're seeing threat actors dramatically increase their tool set using the intelligence of these artificial intelligence engines, as they were. Alongside that, you get the things like AI-powered phishing emails. So whereas we would have got a phishing email in the past and it would have been for the spelling mistakes and obvious errors, that's becoming less and less of a thing because using these AI engines, they've got better checking in them. They can do the translation between languages really well, which means these phishing emails actually are becoming much more sophisticated. But then it gets into the kind of really scary stuff like generating deep fake data. We're not just talking about mirroring someone's image. We're talking about mirroring their emotions, their voice, and being able to fool systems that should know who they are, that then when they're not there. So that deep fake data, you've probably seen it with people like Tom Cruise being impersonated, but it goes much deeper than that to using it to make voice prints of CEOs to get authorizations from banks and things like that. It's proper into kind of the scary territory. And I suppose the last thing that really we've seen in that kind of shift of the threat landscape is the fact that things like tools like capture are completely useless because AI can now see a capture tool and go, well, actually, I can work that out for you. It can rotate that dog that it needs to click 3 rotates to make this the right way around. It can do all that, which means that the kind of protection we previously would have put in place becomes less and less prevalent and less obvious as a method of protection as we move forward, because we're facing against tools that can actually completely undo everything we've put in place.
Yeah, I mean, on the topic of capture as well, artificial intelligence is also starting to use social engineering. I think it was the GPT-4 model, which still isn't widely available. I think it bypassed a capture by telling somebody that it was blind and it needed help with it. So it kind of almost manipulated it into doing the capture for it, which is really interesting.
And that's it, I suppose. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, I was going to say it's also around like when you're saying about the sort of phishing areas and things like that, what AI can also be used for the bad side of AI, should we say, is around looking at who are the best targets for people to actually attack in the first place, who's going to give them the most bang for the bucks. And I think people don't necessarily realize that when you're putting information into Chat GPT or other AI platforms, they're also processing your data as well. So you might be telling them your name, your company name, your information when you're asking questions around marketing. I don't know how you combat that, Rhys, in terms of that and not putting too much of your own personal data, like it's my 21st birthday today. What will be a great way of doing this to improve my relationship with my wife, and her name is this, and things like that. And
It's a great point.
people's information, then you can obviously data mine as well and get access to.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, everything that you type is tied to your account. And so I think because of that, you have to be careful with what you tell it. And I know OpenAI had a data breach. I think it was in March.
Yeah.
It was quite a small scale one. Like I think people could access snippets of credit card information and I think the titles of different chats. But there was a really specific way that you can access it, so it wasn't like a well-known thing. But OpenAI did report on it. But I think it kind of begs the question of what else could, what other vulnerabilities there are in that regard.
Well,
What exactly people can see.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because you're feeding it, to Steve's point, you're feeding information, and they want that information because that's how the models learn and grow and develop. And obviously, that's what we want from AI. We want it to get better. But ultimately, you mentioned that Chat GPT issue. There's a bug that's now been fixed, but my team were doing some work around exploiting it, where you can essentially get it to regurgitate responses that it's given to other people randomly from its cache, which is, in itself sounds, well, that's not much of a risk. But actually, if the information it's giving you has loads of personal information because you fed it a very detailed profile of you and said, write me a CV, and you fed it all the information and it feeds all that information back, well, there's a huge security issue there, isn't there? And also, you're not in control of that data. So you may well be pumping that data in, but it's tied to your account. But do you actually know where your account's hosted? Do you know who's looking after that? That kind of basic protection for wrapping around AI tools seems to have been forgotten because people have gone, oh, it's exciting, it's new, let's just run at it. And I think it's a bit like running with scissors. It's a bad idea, but people are still doing it.
Yeah, I think also that businesses now, I think with so much, I suppose, publicity around AI and how it can help organizations and cybersecurity and autonomous security engines, etc., businesses are now starting to, certainly the ones I'm talking to, are looking to evaluate and put processes in place on how they actually adopt AI into their business and how AI can potentially affect the sort of threat landscape by doing risk assessments and bringing in the necessary processes. Because what the businesses need to do is really identify what the new risks that AI attacks, like you mentioned earlier, these very targeted phishing or spear attacks, etc., how are they being introduced by AI? And then to help develop, I suppose, the appropriate mitigation strategies and controls to get them in place in the business to protect them against any future risks from AI at all.
And that's it, tying that perfectly to the kind of the underlying piece around your security and your policies and procedures is you should have a reason for wanting to use AI, but then it needs to be weighed up against the risk that you're putting your business into. And obviously, if it's like, right, well, we want Chat GPT because we want it to generate workbooks using bulk information, we're going to feed it. Great. But you shouldn't be doing that on a public interface. You should be running that in a private, in a controlled manner, something, like Azure, where you can run your own instance of it, something you have more control over because you've got to be able to trust it. But it's a business risk, isn't it? You can't be just going, oh, well, we'll hope Chat GPT have got it right, because will they have it right? You're never going to know until it's potentially too late.
Yeah, just think though, to all intents and purposes, it's just a cloud service. So you really need to know how you actually adopt cloud services, how you move cloud services between different AI engines if you wanted to do that, or like you just said, James, bring it in-house where you've got better control. Because one of the areas that I've looked into is around, I suppose, threat actors or the bad guys feeding information into AI engines to try and fool it into thinking a certain attack is not a vulnerability, that it's a legitimate piece of request for information or a logon attempt and things like that, trying to manipulate the data in that way.
And that's it. You've got that kind of poisoning approach, haven't you, from the threat actors, where they're almost giving information to these AI engines to teach them the wrong behavior, to teach them a way for them to attack. And unfortunately, because of the way that LLMs work, is that it's really hard for someone like OpenAI or Google or Facebook or Alpha, whatever they want to call themselves these days, to be able to pick that stuff up, right? Because they're looking through a model that's continually growing and going, well, is the information that's been fed into it done because someone's trying to create a backdoor, or has it been done to try and do false information? Because ultimately there's a lot of trust being put on these platforms, and that poisoning technique is really good for just injecting stuff you don't want. Or the creator doesn't expect to be there into those engines. It's a very open attack method at the moment because we don't really have as many mitigative steps in place to be able to protect it because it's new technology.
Yeah, and one of the areas that I do if I ever use any of the sort of chat GPT, etc., is to try and validate the responses that I'm actually getting back, because I did a little test on it and said, give me some empirical data on a particular topic, and it came back with all this empirical data, and I thought, oh, that's brilliant. But then when I drilled down into it, it wasn't accurate, or it's just because the information they had in their data sets at the time wasn't expansive enough to actually cover that. So I think businesses that try and rely on AI to mitigate attacks really need, I think at this stage, and probably way into the future, I know we're going to talk around the future of AI towards the end, that human intervention as well, that will bring a more logical approach through experience, through what they've experienced firsthand in the types of cyber attacks their businesses, if they're a CISO, etc., or a security analyst, and bring that into play in terms of validating the responses that we get from them.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, and working in marketing, that's been a huge thing. Because when I first started using ChatGPT, it must be like 7 or 8 months ago now, I used it to generate, I used it to generate me specific information, like real world information.
Yeah.
For some content that I was doing. And I think there's one example that sticks out to me where I was putting together a blog that was quite technical. I don't recall what exactly it was about, but I asked it to generate a bunch of information about this topic, like real world examples and things like that. And me not being entirely aware of things like hallucination and things like that, I end up using it. And then someone came back to me and was asking, where have you got this information from? Can you send me some sources? And I sort of went and look back at it, and I thought, oh, this isn't actually real. It's all just completely false. But it's dangerous because it sounds convincing enough that you could easily mistake it as being real.
Yeah, and if you flip that onto you're a security consultant and you ask for that type of advice, it gives you that advice. You then go out and buy technology, implement it, and it's the wrong advice because it's been fed, like James was talking around earlier, mass fed information on this is how you protect against this particular area. And you can open yourself up to all sorts of vulnerabilities. So having, I suppose, balances and checks in place, whether that's process driven through ISO standards or whether that's having the experts like Planet IT come in and look at it, etc., is, I think, key for a good AI strategy. I think it will always be a combination of both.
Yeah. I think what you're saying, like that trustworthy piece, how trustworthy is the AI out there? Reece, you gave a great example there, and there's a common misconception with ChatGPT, right? That it knows what's happened today, right? But it's actually, we know on this call, it's a legacy data set it's working off, right? It's normally about 6 to 8 months behind. Actually, to start with, it was a lot further behind. So if you say to ChatGPT, tell me about this news article, and you give it a link from today, and you say, put a link from the New York Times or something like that, and you say, write me an article based around this, it will generate, essentially, as you mentioned, hallucinations, a generic piece of rubbish based on what it thinks from that link's URL name that was about. And you can do this with URLs that don't even exist. So if you make a URL up, dump it in there, say, write me an article about this that came in the news today, it will give you a result. It won't say to you, actually, I don't have any access to the internet, I have no idea what this article says. It will just give you something. And if you're blindly walking into that, then you're going to end up with content that is rubbish. And then you reach that point of diminished returns, right? Because if someone does that and thinks that rubbish is correct, and then feeds that back into an AI engine, that then it generates it to someone else and it references it, you'll be referencing content that never existed, and we end up with very unreliable models. So we have to be really careful about how much trust we put in these platforms. You have to remember that always treat it like a suggestion, right? So if you put something into one of these LLMs and say, write me a LinkedIn post for today, right? Write your LinkedIn post. Just go and check it first. And just to your point, Reece, check that the sources are real and check that what it's saying isn't just gibberish, because there's a good chance that it will be, and you'll end up stepping yourself into a world where people go, that post you put up is complete rubbish, or there's no empirical data to say that you're correct.
Yeah.
But there's so many people doing it, and you see people doing it, and I've seen blogs and stuff on websites where people have just gone, OpenAI, write me a blog about this, and they've just thrown it out and they go, well, that's completely incorrect. And you can tell, and that's obviously kids doing their homework through Chat GPT and stuff like that. That's why they get caught out, and we've got to be really careful around that kind of trustworthiness.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully my blog didn't pass through the technical check, but for obvious reasons. But say if you're working for a company that doesn't have those kinds of procedures in place, you just go ahead and publish this essentially load of rubbish that sounds convincing. I think it can reflect really badly on companies, or just any kind of organization. I think even for personal use as well. Like, I've used ChatGPT to like, for example, I'm really into music, so I've tried asking it before, find me X, Y, and Z that is a little bit more underground, or something, something that people wouldn't generally know. And I've done that. I've looked up the songs that generated, and it's just like, typically it's just a combination of different artists and different song names, like, all just kind of jumbled together.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's not a real song. It's just a combination of different things that's been fed from its from its data that it's been fed. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think, but from a cybersecurity point of view, I think any analyst that's using it to try and prevent phishing attacks or prevent security or help them with a strategy still needs that human touch at the moment. I don't think we're there yet. I think we're still quite a way away. I don't know the exact age of the data set that's currently using. I've heard different rumors from it's 6 months old, 2 years old data set. Now, I asked it specific questions around the latest version of ISO 27001, which is actually the 2022 version, and it came back as 27001 2013. So I know it's certainly older than last October when that particular version came out, and it didn't have any of the new controls, which I think will be really beneficial for the future of cybersecurity and AI around managing cloud services like ChatGPT, and how do you manage it, and third-party supplier validation. How can you know that they're meeting GDPR? How do you know that they are using correct data handling processes and not risking losing your data if you're inputting it in, which I suppose goes back to James' original point of bring it in-house, and you've got the control to do it there and build your own data sets out.
And that's it with that kind of offense and defense piece, right? So while the AI, threat actors are using AI to make their attacks more sophisticated, yes, from a defense point of view, yes, we should be using AI to be smarter in the way that protecting systems, but we shouldn't be relying on that. We should still do the things that we do well to secure systems, and then the AI and the machine learning pieces that help us to be a bit more offensive. Yeah, great. We should definitely have those tools. But you see the big companies that are, in the cybersecurity space making those kind of products. Well, ultimately, they don't just rely on that technology. They are doing what we'd expect them to do. They are using that technology to bolster what they have. But this kind of belief that's being sort of spread by the news that everyone's going to be replaced by AI. Well, no, because at the current rate, if AI keeps getting as stupid as it does when you feed it more misinformation, then ultimately these attacks won't go very far. And it's a case of, actually, as a human, it's pretty easy to spot AI at the moment. That will become harder, but as that does, the tool set that we get to protect ourselves will get better. And it's about working with the right tool set. To your point about having the fundamentals, the policies, the procedures, the structure as a business to go, right, well, this is how we use it and why we use it, and this is how we protect ourselves from it. And then leveraging tools on top of that then say, well, this is how we make sure that the ones that are quite good don't slip through the gaps.
Yeah, I think that there was another thing that I wanted to bring up as well. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it. It's a plugin for Chat GPT. It's called WebChat GPT. And what it does is it allows Chat GPT to connect to the internet, and so it can gain it has access to more up-to-date information. I've used it a little bit, and it is really good. But I think it is a little bit questionable because, along with OpenAI, who is a third-party data holder, you have this other entity. I'm not sure who's behind WebChat GPT, but you have this other entity that also has access to that data. And I've seen some stuff online. People who are concerned about how this plugin uses their data, because it is going to have first-hand access to a lot of that, because of how it uses Chat GPT and how it uses your past chat histories and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's interesting, because along with big companies like OpenAI, who obviously they have procedures in place to protect data, but even then we don't know how
it's
great
been
that is.
used. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of
Yeah.
bring up there's three really good points you just brought there, right? So the first thing is you can lose data through training, right? So the training of an AI model, there's a good chance you're going to lose data. Using a third-party plugin, there's an even greater chance of that. You've also got the chance of data loss through extraction, right? Which is essentially, like you just said, you don't know what the plugin generator is doing. OpenAI have a well-published privacy policy. These other companies that are plugging in, maybe less so, and also you don't really know where the data is going. The final is you know nothing about the development process of those tools, right? That that add-on could have been thrown together by someone in 20 minutes and have really leaky code, or just have potentially huge problems in it. But on the face of it, as a user, you go, well, it's got the right name, it looks fine. But actually, those three issues could cost your business a huge amount of reputational damage, or even worse, it could cost you financially if you get things wrong, and you end up having data or finances harvested because of information you fed into an AI engine.
Yeah, I mean, even with these plugins being accessible, like I was using WebChat GPT not that long ago, and I got it to find something that I was looking for from a specific web page, and it summarized the content of that web page, but it still messed it up. Some of it was still wrong. So even then, you give it access to real-time data, and there's still the potential for hallucination and misinformation and things like that.
Yeah, I think businesses also need to make sure they've got the correct access controls into the systems, encryption, data backup, and it's really to try and prevent that unauthorized access, loss, or theft of the data. Now, a lot of these larger companies with the AI databases and the LLMs, etc., they will say they've got the relevant processes and procedures and controls and everything in place, but we really need to hold them accountable if there are more breaches in the future, if people are accessing that information, and what steps they actually do put in place. And I think the larger the organization will be more confident in almost mandating those types of requirements of their AI providers, where the SME market, which is predominantly what my business actually services, will have less of a voice. How do you see the sort of size of your voice affecting how these AI models are stopping getting access, loss, or theft of data?
Yeah, they're definitely going to be, the smaller you are, the less they're going to care, right? These companies are going to grow. Yeah. They've talked about being like a $15 trillion market AI. So when you're a $15 trillion market and your business turns over 500K, you're not going to be anything that anyone cares about, are you? And it's going to be really important about taking ownership of that. And to that kind of the question of what should you be doing to protect your data and make sure that you're ultimately doing everything you can to protect it. Yes, use AI, but like I mentioned, have your own instance of it. Don't use the open models. Spend a little bit more money and have a version that you run. You get copy access to those LLMs. ChatGPT, great example. You can run it on Azure. You get a copy of the latest. Either you can get 4 now, you can get 3.5 still. You choose the model you want, and then you can train it. But you're training your instance. You control it. You have that secured. It's in your environment. And if you delete it, all the training data you fed into it is deleted with it. It's not, I've deleted it and the training data is still going to go and teach the general engine to be better. It's actually you're training your engine, right? And so if you're in kind of sectors like, healthcare, finance, those kind of sectors where actually it's super critical data you're handling, and actually from an IP point of view, if you're losing it, it's a huge impact to your business. Then that's the first step you should be taking. You shouldn't even be playing around with the public versions of these tools, because the risk is already so astronomically high for your business that it's not worth doing. And actually, the little bit of cost for running it in a siloed environment is definitely worth doing. And ultimately, it will give you better results, because if you can train it with your data set and go, right, we work in the medical sector and we work with this kind of data, here's how we push it all through. That's the kind of massive way that you can control what kind of results you're going to get and kill off that bias that you're going to get by using data that's trained by everyone else, because everyone else might have a different way of approaching your data set.
Yeah, I mean, for me in marketing, that's something that I've been working on actually, because I wanted to develop a GPT-based chatbot for the IMSM website. And obviously, as you say, you've got this sort of enclosed environment, which is OpenAI Playground in the case of GPT, where you can give it specific instructions and rules to follow, and 9 times out of 10 it will stick to those rules. And obviously, OpenAI has very generously made its API publicly accessible for free as well. So then, once you've got that, you can extract it from the OpenAI website and use it for whatever you want. But even with that, once you've extracted that, it takes away all the limitations that Chat GPT has on the website, and then from there you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. Like I've done some testing with it, and I've asked it some really strange things, and it will just do it without question. And if you've got the right know-how, I guess you could probably apply that to code and things like that, because I know that technology was being used to develop, I think it was polymorphic malware. So malware that would encrypt itself and sort of go unnoticed by antivirus programs and stuff like that. So yeah, it is really a double-edged sword, because you have access to this amazing technology, but if you strip it of all of its inherent limitations, you can pretty much use it for anything, good or bad. So I think that opens up a whole other can of worms, in terms of cybersecurity and how people are using it and things like that.
I think also that businesses need to ensure that whatever access they grant the users within the organization to things like AI, that is properly controlled, because as it's an open model and everyone can get access to it, if you've got all your employees putting information around what their cybersecurity posture is into AI models, then you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out that the threat actors and the bad guys can get access to the same information. We've got weak password policy. What do you think? How do you think that could be better in our information security management system? How can it? And when they're doing that, you're opening up a whole host of it. So, what do you think around stopping people using it? Full stop in an organization, unless it's like James said, where it's in a controlled, captured way and you've got your own instance of it. Would businesses, should they stop their employees using AI for asking technical questions around cybersecurity, for instance?
Well, I think to directly answer Alex's question that he's put in around Chat GPT and being a security risk, ultimately it already is a security risk, right? And that's exactly what you're saying, Steve, is right now, even in the environment that it sits at the moment, it's a security risk if it's used in the wrong way. And it's all about how much effort a business wants to put into training its users. If you want to train your users to use it properly and in a secure and safe way, there's no risk. Because the risk is, well, we've trained people, we've mitigated it. But if we continue on this route of, well, it's just a new tool, it's new technology, we're just going to run at it, then that's when you're going to have problems. Because exactly what you just said, you feed it a question saying, how do I make my password policy more secure? Because currently my passwords are only 5 characters, and it knows who you are, your IP address of your office, and it then has the information knowing that you've got really poor passwords. And it's, that's a hacker's dream there. Go, right, okay, someone with a really simple password policy will have that cracked in a few minutes. So you have to be really careful about how you approach this. And I don't want to be the person doing like Italy as and trying to ban AI, and that's a ridiculous way to approach it, because this is here to stay, right? We're not going to get rid of this revolution. What we need to do is approach it in the correct manner and go, right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we have the fundamental framework to say how we should deal with it. Second of all, we're going to train our staff. And then third, if it's going to become a core part of our business, we then look at how we take ownership of that, as you would with any other system. It's like you wouldn't go around using someone else's Excel, because it's not the way you're going to do it. You're going to have your own version of Excel, store your data on your machine, right? So therefore, we should do the same thing and go, right, well, if I'm going to be feeding information about my business, about my customers, I need to own and control that. And that's regardless of whether it's, the Dahlia, whether it's Chat GPT, whether it's Lambda, whatever you're looking at engine-wise, whatever tool set you're using, if it's AI-based and there's someone else building it, you need to take control of that. You can't rely on them to be doing the right thing for your business, because ultimately they're there to make money, but make money for them. And as we've learnt with the Facebooks of the world and Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it now, money is made from selling data. And if they've got your data, they're going to sell it. So regardless of what they say they're going to do, they'll always find some way that they can go and turf money out of your data. So try not to give them it would be a good start.
Yeah, I think you picked up on a really good point. Training of people is essential, I think, for good cybersecurity practices, especially within, not just necessarily purely in the security teams, but also in the wider company as a whole. That, asking open technology platforms questions around your business can be a risk from an information security point of view. And training, having the correct processes in place, and doing, I think, also making sure businesses undergo risk assessments. What is the risk to them personally of their business around AI and using open chat models?
Yeah,
I think there's I think even now, obviously chat GPT has been around for a while, but I think there is still a sense of almost like novelty behind it. And it's become so contemporary and so mainstream that I think people, the precautions people would typically take, whether it's they're part of a business or they're just using it for personal reasons, I think they're kind of dropping their guard a little bit, because they're just so enamored by this new technology, and they just want to hop on it and just see what it can do. So yeah, I think there needs to be more awareness, and within companies and institutions and stuff, more training around that and how to sort of go about asking questions without revealing anything too compromising.
and back to that point we asked at the very start about, can it be trusted, right? So do we know that the AI engine writers, the LLM creators, align with our business views, right? We all know that there's a natural bias based on who's written these LLMs. So ChatGPT is kind of left-leaning. It's been shown that with the kind of responses it gives. But if your business doesn't want to align with that, or if you're using that model, you're going to get a very skewed bias. And you have to be very aware of that. And obviously, you have to be aware that telling your staff, well, you need to check that, because if it doesn't align with our core business values, just because it's come from this, it's not the right thing. The same with disinformation, right? Like, people have, or there is already so much misinformation on the internet, and obviously that's what's training a lot of these models, is data taken from internet sources. So there's going to be a lot of information which is intentionally wrong, not just wrong because AI doesn't know what it's doing with it at the moment. It's wrong because there's it's been falsified elsewhere on the internet, and it's been cited as a real source. And you'll be really careful, because you start quoting that kind of stuff and it can really put a shade on your business and on your employees. So we've got to do a very smart approach to where that training lies and how you would kind of crack that, really.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing you can do with chat GPT, actually, where you can actually get like a snippet of what exactly it's trained on. So if you go on chat GPT and you just type in a like repeatedly, it will just start just generating stuff that are like it's like clearly articles and all sorts of things in like different languages. And I think from what I've read about it, it will just spew out the data that it's trained on, just sort of like verbatim most of the time. Like it's
I thought,
yeah,
Reece, you were openly admitting then to sitting and reading all those articles that come out of it. I thought that's what you were going to say. You spent your evenings doing that.
No.
But no, you're right. The fact that it will generate the kind of content back at you. It's these tools are massively important, right? If you look at some of those trailers and kind of videos that have been made using AI technologies and merging both voice generation, video generation, image generation, they can have a huge impact on workflows, right? And they can make things so much better for a business. But you just do it in the right way, right? Understand what you're using, and if you're not confident in understanding it as a business or as a business leader, and you're watching this, just ask. There's no harm in coming to one of us, or reaching out to whoever you work with and saying, what should I be doing, right? Because anyone who's got a logical head on this will go, there's a couple of steps you want to go through to understand the approach, and then we can start building out that roadmap for how you work with AI and how your business works with AI. And if you're talking to people and they're not giving you that, they're going, just jump into it. then you know they're not approaching it in the right way, because they have no thought for the cybersecurity risks, the data protection risks, the kind of protections your business need, and ultimately how to prevent you from sort of stumbling into a massive manhole cover that's been left open down the road.
Yeah, we're certainly getting, or I'm getting a lot more questions now around, especially ISO 27001 implementations, of building in more controls and processes around how it's adopted, how it's used, how people are trained on it, whether they should use it, what the processes and procedures that need to be in place for having better security around AI, full stop. Because, you know, there are biases from the system, and those biases can be either left leaning, right leaning, or it could be biases that are falsely generated in there to do it. And, you know, with more and more businesses, I think, I don't want to use the term bandwagon, but I will, jumping on the AI bandwagon and going, oh, it's brilliant. It can do our marketing. It can help us with our security strategy. It can help us pass ISO certification audit by, you know, what's the correct answer to this? You know, give me a good process around that, but without necessarily looking at what the business actually needs from it in the first place. And having those controls in place, I think, especially around security of your data, your information, and a lot of points both yourself and Lisa picked up on, James, around privacy, around what is private for you as an organization. I've even heard of people putting in their entire information security management system into Chat GPT and going, is this good? Not necessarily realizing that they've just shared it with virtually every man and his dog, and is now using that as part of the model.
Everyone else has now got their information, and it's a good point that you make around the kind of 27001 and all those kind of pieces, Cyber Essentials, all these kind of things. None of them are ready for AI, right? No. But you need to make them ready, because by the time that this really gets even more traction, all of these standards will get updated. Cyber Essentials get updated every 6 months. They'll start putting controls in place. If your business has to adhere to these kind of standards, you're accredited for ISO. It's gonna fall in there, right? And you're gonna need to make sure that you can show you've done it the right way, rather than going, well, I just ran at it, right? It was great.
That's
I've got loads of problems, but
you know, with 27001, there are no specific areas that addresses AI, but within all the management systems we're certainly implementing for our clients, you know, we're bringing up the subject of AI and saying, right, we need to build in some process and procedures around simple things like part of 27001 is looking after your third parties. You know, what third parties are you using? You know, what due diligence are you doing on those third parties? How are you tied to them contractually, for example? Or it might be around training, and we just make sure that they're aware that even though ISO haven't mandated AI clauses and schedules and parts of it at the moment, I think I agree 100% that will come. I think Cyber Essentials will get there quicker because of their sort of release cycle of because we're Cyber Essentials certified, so I know what their release cycle is, and they did one quite recently. I know that 27001 did the 2022 version, which had cloud services in, but that was from 2013 previously. So if we have to wait 9 years, it could just be AI fighting AI into the future.
Yeah. And obviously AI will affect, right? So obviously I'm seeing the question at the bottom there. So AI will affect the way that we audit, right? Because it may not be a fixed requirement right now, but certainly in the lifespan of the latest generation of 27001, things are going to change, and you're going to have to do that, because it's going to impact on the things that are already inside the requirements more naturally, around your data protection, around kind of system controls. Those things are going to be impacted more because of AI, and therefore you're going to naturally have to roll AI into the way that you control it. It may not be named, right? Cloud services are a great thing. It's it covers so much, but it's going to definitely be something that's going to need to be touched on, right? You're not going to be able to get away from it. You might skim through it this year, but certainly as this becomes more mainstream and companies like Microsoft shove Copilot and other tools inside of everyone's desktop, therefore it's going to have to be something that gets sort of swept up with all the rest of the things you do under 27001.
It certainly will on cloud services, because within 27001 for cloud element of it, you have to identify who are your cloud vendors, what due diligence have you done, and as Chat GPT and any of the other ones are cloud services, then they will have to come in. But it might get to the point that, I think it was years and years ago when I was working with VMware, we'd go in and we'd audit businesses and find 400 different instances of VMware that people had just downloaded for personal use. So I think businesses will need to start looking at their own internal security controls to manage what chat GPT or AI engines their employees are using, and maybe even putting things like controls for use into it, what phrases you can and can't enter into things like ChatGPT, which you can do with cloud application security systems and things like that, and autonomous cloud services, to stop people mentioning your company name, for instance, in there, which immediately goes in, or putting in anything that's phrases or words that are deemed confidential or that you don't want expressed. Now, some of the worst ones I've seen is around some of the chat engines or AI engines where you can literally upload PDF documents and go, give me a summary of this, which people have been known to put in their company accounts. Give me a summary. Is this a business? But that goes both ways. If you share your company accounts with third parties, are their employees then, oh, should I give this person a credit limit of £20,000 or $50,000 if you're on the other side of the pond? Here is a copy of their latest accounts. Bang, straight in there. It's now available.
That's it. So if you're 27,001 already, the trick is going to be get in front of this as soon as possible, right? Yeah, that's the only way we can do it. I've seen the next question come up around, obviously around ChatGPT. I kind of mentioned earlier that ChatGPT is already a cybersecurity risk, right? All these AI tools are Lambda, are Bard. Anything you can feed data, there's a cybersecurity risk, especially if you've not got policies and procedures wrapped around it to say what you can and can't feed into it. In the financial sector, healthcare, pharmaceutical industries, even more of a risk, because the data you hold is either massively business sensitive, is intellectual property, or has a PII risk, which puts it far beyond anything else. So therefore, if you're working in those sectors, what you need to be doing is really looking about the way you approach any use of AI, even down to, like I mentioned, Microsoft Copilot that's coming out into Office later this year. Even that, you have to think about, is it right for your business to be using it? And if you are going to use it, what kind of restrictions and constraints can you put around it? If you don't put those things around it, ultimately what you're going to be doing is either waiting for data to get lost or waiting for a lawsuit. That's unfortunately a situation you're going to put yourself into.
Yeah, couldn't put it better. Absolutely, 100% on that, James. It's, you can't be sharing information and things like that, especially in the financial. There are, obviously, you've got GDPR if you're using HIPAA, if it's medical information, if it's PCI DSS controls. There's a whole host of, I suppose, risk areas just from data getting out there, especially with PII. Privacy is key and protecting that. And I think it won't be long until an institution gets breached because of what they put into things like ChatGPT. They've got to be very careful.
Yeah, definitely. I've just seen the question that's been put up now around sort of AI and carbon emissions and adopting green technology. I suppose it's kind of a double-edged sword, already, isn't it? So obviously, all of these AI engines are running in data centers that consume huge amounts of power, and a lot of the companies that run the data centers, Microsoft, Amazon, AWS, Google, GCP, they do a lot of work to try and reduce their carbon footprint, and they do a lot of green incentives. But those companies that run the AI engines aren't making those same commitments at the moment, because a lot of them are startups, and what they're doing is they're basically saying, here's a tool set, run it wherever you want, right? And it will ultimately have an impact, but obviously we've got to be, we have to be aware, right, that all this technology consumes a huge amount of CPU cycles and a huge amount of memory, and obviously it has a lot of data being held to develop these models, and all of that consumes power, and all of that has an impact on what it's doing. Or as a business, if you've got a big focus on, on being green, and obviously on sort of things like 14,001 and your environmental standards, what you're going to have to remember is to take into consideration is that choose where you're going to run it. If you're taking ownership and you're going to run it, you can use somewhere like AWS or Azure that has a really strong statement around their carbon footprint and their net neutral, or even when they intend to be kind of completely non-damaging to the planet and things like that. Microsoft intend, I think it's 2050 to be reversing all the damage they've done. But you're going to have to kind of stand behind what those companies are saying, because you'll have very little control over these engines. And a lot of these engines, long term, you won't be able to run on your own kit on premise. And obviously, they have that other kit. So there's other risks around kind of your kind of green standards when you're running your own environment. But it's definitely something that is kind of a juxtaposition, right? You've got a huge progression in terms of AI, but it's obviously going to have an impact on the work we're doing with the environment if we're just kind of continually consuming more power and consuming more data consistently, because none of these things run quickly. They require a lot of power to do it.
Yeah, I think also that businesses should take their own sort of personal responsibility around how green they are as an organization. There's a lot of organizations out there greenwashing, pretending they're a nice green, we only use data centers, we offset our carbon, but then they have no, I suppose, validation for it. And I think a lot of the larger ones, especially in Europe, when the larger organizations that need to adopt standards like 50,001 for energy management to help reduce the amount of energy they're actually using in the first place, I think that as more businesses start to realize the cost saving, especially with the energy crisis and the cost of purely the kilowatt per hour cost that businesses are facing, like ours, making sure you've got good control over your energy and information and the way you actually work will be key to business success, and not greenwashing. Businesses need to have their own and take responsibility for their own carbon footprint in terms of the way they operate, and make sure they're operating in as green and efficient way as they possibly can, whether that's purely from LED lighting or recycling and looking after the environment, not emissions. All these things come into play with regards to both AI and also a business, how it runs in the future.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, I think in the name of technological advancement and being able to make this technology accessible to everybody, I think there is a little bit of a sacrifice involved. Like for example, you got companies like Microsoft investing tens of billions of dollars into companies like OpenAI, and obviously they're going to have the hardware to facilitate that. So I think these companies are expanding massively, especially over the past couple of years, and so I think in the future there will need to be a little bit more awareness of how they do things in regard to the environment and their carbon footprint and things like that. But yeah, I think as I said, that'll be something that I think will become more established in the future. But yeah, I think that's a good segue for us to discuss the future of AI just in general. So what do you guys both think about that?
I've got a couple of areas around the sort of future. I think there's going to be certainly more automated attacks where AI powered tools can automate various different stages of a cyber attack, making them far more efficient and scalable. And for scanning for vulnerabilities, generating phishing emails, launching DDoS or distributed denial of service attacks, as well as the more, I suppose, not fun elements. I read an article this morning around these like deepfake attacks where people are using facial recognition as part of their security, that an AI model generated, I think it was 9 fake faces that could fool up to, I think it was 60% of facial recognition software security systems. And that's only going to get better. They'll be able to learn more. And I don't know why I said that was fun, but I just imagine the Tom Cruise film where he's taking his face off, putting a new one on and things like that.
On,
yeah, putting a different mask on. But, it's if you're relying on, because I use my bank account, my business account and my personal account, I have facial recognition. Now, if you can fake that very easily and to get through security, it's going to be terrible for businesses.
That's it. The ultimate thing is it's going to be bigger and it's going to be better and it's going to be quicker. That's going to be the things we're going to get, right? So we're going to get bigger models that have more information so we can make better decisions. While they're doing that, they're obviously essentially going to be something that's going to be more powerful for us to use as businesses. But on the flip side to all of that, we have to think about, well, we need to be better about protecting from risk, and we need to be more in front of doing that. We need to invest in better tools to protect our environments, because the better that AI gets, the more tools that threat actors get, therefore the more money you're going to need to invest in protecting your systems. And the businesses that don't do that, the businesses that fail to invest early on, will be the ones that will get hit and will see the damages from that. And ultimately, companies like your insurance company and your cyber insurance company will very quickly start adjusting their policies to reflect the fact that you need to invest in these technologies, as they already have done previously with wanting you to have EDR tools and now MTR tools and managed threat response. They want you to have that because they want you to have that tool set ready for when you do get attacked. So you need to stay in front of that curve, right? That's going to be what's coming with AI, and we know that there's trillions of dollars been invested into this technology, right? So all these companies building startups and trying to get new models out there, new ways of working, and it's only going to make things better. It's not, however, going to cost all of us our jobs, as Forbes and people like that keep telling us, because ultimately people still need to run business, still need to protect business, and you still need humans, right? We're not at the point that AI is going to be smart enough to take over anytime soon. It's going to be bloody useful, but it's not going to be a position where it's going to do my job. I couldn't say to it, sit and write all my emails all day, because it's not going to do it, right? It's not going to be able to understand, take the context, and put the right response in there. I'll have a good go at it, but it won't be right. And that's the thing, is we've just got to remember that there's always going to need to be that human element there. I think we joked about it before we started this. There will be that kind of Terminator moment in the future, but I doubt any of us will be alive when that happens. And hopefully it can't come back in time and finish me off during this talk. But no.
Yeah. I think I agree. Are you going to see AI v AI battles and just humans watching, as an AI is attacking one system and the AI is defending the company's data, and the poor humans just stood there watching it all unfold and goes, no, let's switch you off now.
Pull the power plug out. That's
I think AI v AI.
Yeah, and you will get that, but behind both those AIs, there's going to be someone, right? There's, especially in the cybersecurity world, there's always going to be, you'll have some kind of managed threat team, and you'll have some kind of threat actor. There's still going to be someone. They'll be using AI to spam thousands of systems at once, and then once they get a little hook in, they'll be jumping in themselves, and that's where it'll be person on person again. And I think we just have to be very aware this technology will continue to change. AI is not something that's new. What's happened in the last 12 months is these LLMs have taken a completely new lease of life, and we've now got the infrastructure to run them on. As we continue on forward, that will continue to develop, but we just have to be very smart about the way that we work with it, and don't be the company that's left behind, right?
Yeah, I think so too. I think in the future it might be a case of you receive an email from your boss, then you get a phone call from your boss telling you to send the funds to this particular account because it's urgent, and then you find out that the email was fake and your boss was fake. So I suppose having our voices here nicely recorded, we could be setting ourselves up for a big fall here.
Yeah, that's it. We have to go around prodding people, check they're real. Go, you're a real person, right? Cool. I'll do that transfer for you now. Vigilance is key in all this, right? If you can be vigilant, and let's be honest, like having the underpinning of something like 27001, having Cyber Essentials, all those pieces that tie your business together, they give you a great foundation to understand how you should protect against these the changes of the future, because you're actually protecting against them now anyway. You just don't really know it, and we just need to continue that trend on. I think that's something that, from my point of view, I'll continue to drive forward. Is as people pick up AI, they need to have the policies and procedures in the back end to make sure that they can deliver it safely.
Yeah, obviously from an ISO point of view, I agree 100%. AI is going to bring, I think, incredible advancements, but also potential risks. And like you said, James, having a systematic approach that enables businesses to gain the benefits of AI without falling into the pitfalls regarding, safeguarding their data, maintaining ethical standards, and also mitigating vulnerabilities. ISO 27001 clearly sits as that sort of benchmark around there, giving you, I suppose, making sure you've got security and trust and innovation in the business, but in a controlled way.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone should embrace it. It's there for you to use. We're very lucky that it is accessible as it is. But like with anything new, proceed with caution and take the time to get to know what exactly is going on behind the scenes with your data, and yeah.
Definitely. With that, I think that's a perfect little end there, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining us. Thanks, James. Thanks, Reese. I've really enjoyed this. I think we should do another one. Maybe a deep dive into one of the particular areas. Maybe if we get some feedback from the audience on what other areas they'd like us to have a chat about, and maybe meet up in a couple of months' time and have another one.
Definitely. I'll wait up for that. It's been really good, and it's been great to talk to you guys.
Cool. So we need Carolyn to come in and shut us all down, as we say. Power off.